A betrayal that changed everything. I can't believe I'm writing this. It feels like the kind of thing that happens to other people, not me. But here I am, doing the worst thing I could have possibly done, and I don't know where to turn. I guess I should start from the beginning, even though I'm terrified to relive it. This is so much harder than I ever imagined. I've known Clara since we were kids. We met in second grade, and since then, we've been inseparable. Our friendship was always the kind of deep, unspoken bond that made me believe nothing could tear us apart. And then there was Josh. Josh is the guy Clara had been dating for 2 years. They were one of those couples that everyone envied, the kind where they're always laughing together, always holding hands, always just right. When Clara and Josh first got together, I was happy for her. I was her best friend. I supported them, cheered them on, and adored the way Josh made her smile. But somewhere along the way, things started to change. Maybe it was something I didn't even notice at first. The way Josh would look at me when Clara wasn't around. The way he'd make little jokes that lingered a little too long, or how his eyes would follow me across the room. I'd brush it off. After all, Josh was Clara's boyfriend. I wasn't going to think anything of it, and it was nothing, right? Just harmless flirting. That was my first mistake. I didn't wake up one morning and decide to betray my best friend. It didn't work like that. It started with him texting me more often than usual, asking me to hang out when Clara was busy or away. But the more we talked, the more I began to feel something. There's no easy way to admit this. I started to like Josh. Not in the he's cute way or the he's a great guy way, but in a way that made me feel sick to my stomach. I found myself looking forward to his texts, smiling at the thought of seeing him, and my heart would race when he'd laugh at my jokes. It was terrifying because I knew I was walking a very dangerous line, but I didn't stop. At first, I justified it to myself. We're just friends. He's just being friendly. But deep down, I knew the truth. I knew I was crossing a line, and it scared me. I had no idea how far things would go, but I kept telling myself I could control it. One night, Clara had invited me to a party. She was out of town for the weekend, and Josh was going with some friends. We'd all been planning to meet there. But as the night wore on, I found myself more and more drawn to Josh. He was standing near the bar, a drink in his hand, looking more relaxed than I'd ever seen him. He caught my eye from across the room, and for the first time, it felt like there was no one else there. When I walked over to him, he smiled and handed me a drink. Our conversation felt different this time, more charged, like we both knew something we weren't admitting. And then, without thinking, I leaned in a little too close, and he did the same. The next thing I knew, we were kissing. It wasn't like anything I'd ever imagined. It was intense, consuming, like a force I couldn't fight. I knew in that moment that I was making the biggest mistake of my life, but I couldn't pull away. When we broke apart, we both stood there for a moment, frozen, as though we were both trying to process what had just happened. When we broke apart, we both stood there for a moment, frozen, as though we were both trying to process what had just happened. When we broke apart, we both stood there for a moment, frozen, as though we were both trying to process what had just happened. I shouldn't have done that, I whispered, my heart pounding in my chest. But he just shook his head and said, I don't regret it. That's when I realized I was already too deep. The next few days were a blur. I couldn't look at Josh the same way. The guilt ate at me, but the pull between us was undeniable. Every time I saw him, every text, every conversation felt like it was drawing me further into a web of lies. He kept telling me we didn't have to tell Clara, that it was just a mistake, but I couldn't lie to myself anymore. I was cheating on my best friend. And yet, I kept going. The affair continued. Every stolen moment felt like both ecstasy and torture. I loved the way he made me feel, wanted, desired, special. But at the same time, I hated myself. I hated the way I'd betrayed Clara, the way I'd ruined our friendship, the way I was allowing this to continue. I felt like I was suffocating, but I couldn't stop myself. I tried to justify it. It's just one mistake. It doesn't have to mean anything, I told myself. But it did mean something. It meant everything. I was so deep into it now. Every time Josh touched me, I felt the weight of what I was doing. But the more we were together, the more I was convinced that there was no turning back. And then the unthinkable happened. Clara found out. It was a Tuesday evening when it all came crashing down. Clara was sitting on the couch in my living room, her face pale. Her eyes were red, and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. I felt the blood drain from my face as soon as I saw her. She wasn't saying anything, just staring at me. Her lips quivered as she spoke. "Why, Lexi? Why him?" I froze. My heart felt like it was going to explode. I wanted to say something, anything. But the truth was, there was no excuse. How could I explain that I didn't mean for it to happen? That I didn't want to hurt her? I began, but my voice cracked. "Don't lie to me," Clara snapped. I know everything. I saw the texts, I saw the pictures." The room felt suffocating. The guilt I'd been carrying for so long came crashing down on me. I wanted to curl up and disappear, to make it all go away, but there was no escaping it now. "I'm so sorry, Clara. I never meant for this to happen, I swear," I whispered, my eyes welling up with tears. "I don't know what to say. I didn't want to hurt you, but I couldn't stop. I didn't know how to make it stop." Clara's eyes filled with anger and hurt, but there was something else there too. Disappointment. "You ruined everything, Lexi. Everything. You've destroyed me. You've destroyed us." Clara's eyes filled with anger and hurt, but there was something else there too. Disappointment. "You ruined everything, Lexi. Everything. You've destroyed me. You've destroyed us." Clara's eyes filled with anger and hurt, but there was something else there too. Disappointment. "You ruined everything, Lexi. Everything. You've destroyed me. You've destroyed us." And that's when it hit me. I'd lost her. I'd lost the one person who meant more to me than anyone else in the world. I had no one to blame but myself. Things between Clara and I have never been the same. She hasn't spoken to me since that day, not even to scream at me. I think she's done with me. And I don't blame her. Josh and I tried to talk about it afterward. We both knew what we'd done couldn't be undone, but I kept telling myself I could make things right with Clara. Maybe we could repair our friendship. Maybe. But deep down, I knew I couldn't fix this. I knew I'd crossed a line I could never uncross. Josh's messages have become more distant, more strained. I've felt his interest waning. He's just as much a coward as I am. We both did something terrible, but neither of us is brave enough to confront the fallout. It's been weeks since everything exploded, and I'm left here, feeling like a hollow version of the person I once was. I don't know how to move forward. I can't go back to how things were, but I can't imagine a future without Clara in it either. And Josh? I don't even know anymore. I don't know if I want him or if I just can't stand the thought of being alone.